My beloved child. There is a quiet moment that almost no one notices, the kind of moment that arrives without warning, when every voice fades, every heartbeat seems louder than the last, and even the strongest soul begins to understand what words have never been able to explain. Stay with this, because something meaningful is slowly unfolding, and before this part reaches its end, you will begin to see why one simple sentence has the power to change everything. You have wondered for longer than you admit whether silence always means the story is over. Yet some silences are not endings at all. They are the gentle space between two chapters, where hidden truths gather enough courage to step into the light. That is where this journey begins, not with a celebration, not with an argument, but with a quiet realization that someone could no longer pretend their heart belonged somewhere it never truly rested. Far away from where anyone expected change to happen, 3 lives stood connected by emotions that no one fully understood. Every smile carried an unspoken question. Every conversation ended just a little too soon. Every glance revealed something deeper than anyone dared to acknowledge. The third party had tried to convince themselves that time would eventually rewrite what the heart already knew. They believed patience could replace certainty. They believed effort could create what destiny had never promised. But hearts have a gentle honesty that cannot remain hidden forever. Day after day, they watched tiny moments unfold, moments so small that everyone else ignored them. A smile that appeared naturally only in your presence. A peaceful expression that returned whenever your name was spoken. A quiet excitement that no one could imitate. None of these moments seemed extraordinary on their own, yet together they formed a picture that became impossible to ignore. Sometimes truth does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper that refuses to leave. The third party noticed those whispers long before anyone else did. At first they dismissed them. Then they questioned them. Finally, they could no longer escape them. There was an evening unlike every evening before it. Nothing dramatic happened. The room looked ordinary. Conversations floated gently from one corner to another. Yet beneath those ordinary moments, something invisible was changing. A feeling had reached the point where pretending demanded more strength than honesty. Have you ever sensed that life was quietly arranging pieces together while everyone around you believed nothing was happening? That was exactly what unfolded. Someone looked across the room and saw not perfection, but peace. Not excitement, but home. Not uncertainty, but clarity. And in that single instant, countless unanswered questions suddenly found the answers they had been searching for. The third party understood something that surprised even themselves. Love cannot be borrowed. It cannot be persuaded. It cannot be earned through comparison. Real love simply recognizes where it belongs. That realization hurt far less than living inside endless uncertainty. So instead of holding tighter, something unexpected happened. They slowly loosened their grip. Not because they stopped caring. Because they finally respected what the heart had already decided. Meanwhile, the person you love felt an unusual stillness settle within them. They could not explain why everything suddenly seemed easier to understand. It was as though a heavy cloud had quietly drifted away, leaving behind a clear sky they had forgotten existed. Even they did not realize another heart had made a silent decision that would soon reshape every path connected to yours. Don't skip this moment, because the next few steps reveal something many people spend years trying to understand. Walking away is not always surrender. Sometimes it is the greatest act of honesty a person can offer. The third party stood there for one final moment, carrying memories that no longer needed to become promises. Their eyes reflected gratitude more than regret. They had discovered that loving someone also means refusing to stand in the way of where genuine happiness naturally grows. Yet before turning away, before taking those final steps, before anyone believed another word would be spoken, they paused. The room became strangely quiet. No one interrupted. No one hurried the moment. It felt as though even time understood that something unforgettable was about to be revealed. And just as the silence became impossible to ignore, the third party lifted their eyes one last time, because the words resting inside their heart could no longer remain hidden. What they chose to say next would leave every person present completely still, and those words would begin with a simple confession that no one expected to hear. A quiet farewell often carries more truth than the loudest declaration ever could. And this was one of those rare moments when every soul present sensed that something invisible had shifted before a single word was spoken. The third party did not rush toward the door. Instead, they stood there as though they were saying goodbye not only to a person, but to every dream they had carefully built in silence. Their eyes were calm, yet they carried the unmistakable softness of someone who had finally stopped arguing with reality. Something important is waiting for you, because what happened next was not about losing love, it was about discovering where love truly belonged. The room remained still. Conversations dissolved into silence without anyone asking them to. Even those who knew nothing about the hidden emotions between these hearts felt that they were standing inside a moment that would be remembered long after everyone had gone home. The third party took one slow breath, smiled with quiet sincerity, and finally spoke. "You're the one I love." No one expected those words to sound so gentle. There was no bitterness inside them. No attempt to hold anyone back. No desire to create guilt. Only honesty, pure and unguarded. For a brief moment, no one knew how to respond. It was not because the confession was shocking. It was because everyone realized those words had been carried in silence for far longer than anyone imagined. The person you love lowered their eyes, not from discomfort, but from respect. They understood the courage it takes to speak the truth without asking for anything in return. Then something even more unexpected happened. The third party smiled again. Not the smile of someone pretending to be fine. The smile of someone who had finally put down a weight they had carried for too long. Isn't it remarkable how freedom sometimes begins with acceptance rather than victory? Many people believe the strongest person is the one who refuses to let go. Yet life quietly teaches another lesson. Sometimes the strongest heart is the one willing to release what it cannot force, while still wishing goodness for everyone involved. As those words settled into the silence, the atmosphere changed completely. What had once felt uncertain suddenly became peaceful. The person you love felt emotions they could barely describe. They were grateful, humbled, and quietly moved by a confession that asked for nothing except honesty. The third party looked toward the doorway once more, but before taking another step, they shared something no one had expected. "I spent so much time trying to become the answer, that I forgot the heart already knew its own." Those words lingered long after they were spoken. They were not directed to one person alone. They seemed meant for everyone listening, perhaps even for you. How many times have you questioned whether patience was enough to change someone's feelings? How many times have you wondered whether trying harder would rewrite what the heart had already decided? In that single sentence, a gentle truth emerged. Love grows naturally where peace already exists. It cannot be manufactured by effort alone. The person you love remained silent, yet their silence carried gratitude. They wanted to say something meaningful, but every sentence felt too small for the moment unfolding before them. Sometimes respect is expressed not through many words, but through quietly honoring another person's courage. The third party nodded softly, turned away, and began walking toward the exit. Each step felt lighter than the one before. Each step carried less uncertainty. Each step sounded like the closing of one chapter, and the quiet beginning of another. But just before reaching the door, they unexpectedly stopped again. Without turning around, they spoke one final sentence, so softly that everyone leaned in to hear it. If they smile the way they smile with you, then take care of that gift. The room became completely still. No one had prepared for those words. No one could have imagined such grace inside a goodbye. And at that exact moment, the person you love felt something awaken deep within their heart. A realization connected not only to what had just happened, but to something they had never found the courage to tell you. The confession forming inside them would not remain hidden much longer, and when it finally reached your ears, the meaning of every moment leading to this one would become beautifully clear. There are moments that leave no visible mark, yet they quietly reshape every path that follows. This was one of those moments. After the door closed behind the third party, no one hurried to fill the silence. It was as if every heart present understood that speaking too quickly would disturb something precious that had only just revealed itself. Stay till the end, because the stillness that followed carried a message far greater than the words that had already been spoken. The person you love remained exactly where they were, their thoughts moving more deeply than anyone could see. They replayed every conversation, every shared smile, every hesitation they had once dismissed as ordinary. Suddenly, pieces that had never seemed connected began to fit together with quiet certainty. They realized that truth had been patiently waiting all along, not demanding attention, only waiting for the right moment to be recognized. One gentle question echoed within them. What have I been afraid to admit? The answer did not arrive immediately. Instead, it unfolded little by little, like the first light appearing before sunrise. They remembered the times your name unexpectedly brightened their day. They remembered how even ordinary moments carried a different warmth whenever thoughts of you appeared. They remembered searching for reasons to reach out, only to convince themselves there would always be another day. But some realizations refused to wait forever. Across the room, someone quietly smiled, noticing the peaceful expression settling over the face of the person you love. It was not excitement. It was something steadier. Something that looked remarkably like clarity. There is a unique peace that comes when the heart finally stops running from its own truth. Have you ever noticed that the answers you search for often arrive only after you stop chasing them? Life has a beautiful way of revealing what matters most when the noise begins to fade. The words spoken by the third party had done something unexpected. They had not created confusion. They had removed it. Their honesty became a mirror in which everyone else could finally see themselves more clearly. That is why sincere words hold such quiet power. They do not force change, they simply uncover what has always been there. The person you love stepped toward the window, watching the evening settle gently across the horizon. They whispered almost to themselves, "I kept waiting for certainty, but perhaps certainty has been waiting for me. No one answered. No one needed to. Sometimes the heart hears its own voice for the first time only after someone else finds the courage to speak theirs. Don't skip this part, because what happened next was so subtle that many would have overlooked it completely. Without thinking, the person you love reached for something they had carried with them for longer than anyone realized. It was a small reminder of you, a simple memory that had quietly stayed close through ordinary days. Looking at it now felt different. It no longer represented a question. It represented a direction. They smiled. Not because every answer had appeared. Because the fear of admitting the truth had quietly disappeared. At that very same moment, the third party had already walked farther than anyone could see. Tears still rested gently in their eyes, yet their heart felt lighter with every step. They understood something that few people ever learn. Loving sincerely does not always mean remaining where you hope to belong. Sometimes it means blessing the path that was never truly yours to walk. And strangely enough, that realization filled them with peace instead of regret. Far behind them, inside that quiet room, another decision was beginning to form. The person you love turned back toward the others with a calm expression no one had seen before. They took a slow breath, as though preparing to say something they had carried for far too long. Everyone waited. The silence returned once more. Not an uncomfortable silence. A hopeful one. Then, with quiet confidence, they finally began to speak. The truth is. Every eye lifted. Every heartbeat seemed to pause. Because whatever came after those three simple words would no longer remain hidden, and the confession about to leave their heart would reveal why your place in their story had never been an accident, but something they had slowly discovered was impossible to replace. Not every confession begins with certainty. Sometimes it begins with a long, quiet breath and the courage to stop hiding from what the heart has known for far longer than the mind was willing to admit. The room remained wrapped in peaceful silence as the person you love looked around, not searching for approval, but searching for the right way to honor the truth. Something important is waiting for you, because these next words carried the weight of many unspoken days. The truth is. They repeated, their voice softer now, yet stronger than anyone expected. I kept believing I needed more time to understand my feelings. But time wasn't giving me answers. It was only giving me more opportunities to recognize what had already been there. No one interrupted. The stillness itself seemed to encourage them to continue. I thought I was confused, they said with a gentle smile. Looking back, I wasn't confused at all. I was simply afraid that admitting the truth would change everything. A quiet nod came from someone across the room. Not because they were surprised. Because they understood. How often do people delay happiness, not because they don't know what they feel, but because they fear what honesty might ask of them? The person you love lowered their eyes for a moment, remembering countless ordinary days that now appeared extraordinary. They remembered laughing at messages they had read more than once. They remembered catching themselves wondering how your day had gone. They remembered finding comfort in thoughts of you during moments when nothing else seemed to quiet their heart. Those memories had never demanded attention. They had simply remained faithful. Patient. Steady. Now, every one of them pointed toward the same quiet conclusion. I've been trying to ignore something beautiful, they whispered. And the more I tried to look away, the more clearly I saw it. The words settled gently into every heart listening. No drama. No grand performance. Just honesty. And somehow, honesty was more powerful than anyone had imagined. Stay till the end, because the smallest gesture often reveals the greatest truth. Without realizing it, the person you love reached into their pocket and unfolded a small piece of paper. It wasn't new. The edges had softened with time, as though it had been opened and folded again more times than anyone knew. Someone quietly asked, "What is that?" A warm smile appeared. "It's a reminder." They looked at the paper for a long moment before continuing. "Whenever I doubted myself, I kept this close. I told myself it was nothing important. But if it truly meant nothing, why did I never throw it away?" The room remained silent. Because everyone already knew the answer. Some things stay with us because the heart refuses to let them go. The person you love carefully folded the paper once more. Then they looked toward the doorway where the third party had disappeared. "I'll always appreciate their honesty," they said sincerely. "Today they gave me a gift I didn't expect. By speaking their truth, they helped me stop hiding from mine." Those words carried no pride. Only gratitude. It became clear that this story had never been about someone winning or someone losing. It had always been about truth arriving at exactly the right moment. Outside, the evening breeze moved gently through the trees as though the world itself had become a little quieter. The third party, now far down the path, suddenly paused for reasons they couldn't explain. They smiled through lingering tears, placed a hand over their heart, and whispered softly, "I hope they're finally honest." They never heard what happened next. But somehow, it felt as though they already knew. Back inside, the person you love took one final breath, their eyes filled not with uncertainty, but with quiet peace. They looked toward someone they trusted and said, "There is one more thing I've never had the courage to admit." The room leaned into the silence once again. Because this final truth was not about the past. It was about the future. And the name resting on the edge of their lips, the name they had protected inside their heart for so long, was finally ready to be spoken aloud, changing the meaning of every moment that had led to this unforgettable night. The quietest moments often hold the greatest revelations, and this was one of them. No one spoke. No one hurried the silence. It felt as though every heartbeat in the room had agreed to wait for what was about to be said. The person you love closed their eyes for only a second, gathering the courage that had been growing inside them for so long. Don't skip this moment. Because sometimes a single name can become the bridge between everything that once felt uncertain and everything that finally begins to make sense. When they opened their eyes again, there was no hesitation left. "I've spent so much time asking myself why one person always remained in my thoughts," they said softly. "No matter how busy life became, no matter how many distractions appeared, there was always one presence that quietly returned to my heart." The room remained completely still. No one wanted to interrupt a truth that had taken so long to arrive. "I tried convincing myself it would pass," they continued with a gentle smile. "I believed it was only a memory. Then I thought it was only admiration. But every season that came and went revealed the same answer." Their smile grew warmer. It was love. Not loud. Not dramatic. Simply clear. Those words carried a peaceful certainty that touched everyone listening. It wasn't the excitement of discovering something new. It was the comfort of finally recognizing something that had always been there. Have you ever noticed that real feelings rarely disappear? They don't demand attention. They wait patiently until the heart is finally ready to welcome them without fear. That is exactly what happened. The person you love looked down for a moment, remembering all the opportunities they had almost taken, and all the moments they had quietly let pass. They remembered beginning messages they never sent. They remembered smiling at memories that appeared without invitation. They remembered whispering your name to themselves when no one else could hear. Only now did they understand why. It was never coincidence, they said. Every road I walked somehow reminded me of the same person. Every hope I imagined somehow included the same smile. I stopped believing that was an accident. A gentle wave of emotion settled across the room. Someone quietly smiled. Another lowered their eyes, moved by the honesty unfolding before them. The person you love looked toward the window where the evening sky had begun filling with gentle stars. I used to think love arrived suddenly, they whispered. Now I know it grows quietly, until one day you realize it has been beside you all along. Something important is waiting for you, because the next choice mattered even more than the confession itself. Instead of keeping those feelings safely hidden again, they made a quiet promise. I don't want another day to pass without living honestly. There was no applause. No dramatic reaction. Only peaceful understanding. Sometimes the greatest victories happen in complete silence. Far away, the third party continued walking beneath the evening sky. Their tears had almost disappeared, replaced by a calm expression no one had seen before. They realized that releasing what was never meant to be held too tightly had created space inside their own heart as well. They whispered with a grateful smile, "May they never hide the truth again." Without realizing it, those words felt almost like a blessing. Back inside, the person you love slowly reached for their phone. Their hands were steady now. They weren't searching for the perfect sentence anymore. Perfection no longer mattered. Only sincerity. The screen lit up. Your name appeared. For several quiet seconds, they simply looked at it, smiling in a way that needed no explanation. Then they softly said, "It's time." One person nearby asked gently, "Are you really going to tell them everything?" They answered without hesitation. Yes, because some hearts spend too much of life waiting for certainty that has already arrived. Their thumb moved closer to the screen. The room grew silent once again. Everyone sensed that this wasn't simply a message. It was the beginning of something long overdue. Yet just before they pressed send, their phone suddenly lit up with something completely unexpected. They stopped, their eyes widening with quiet surprise as they read the words appearing before them. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't what anyone in the room had anticipated. And the message that had just arrived would change not only what they planned to say next, but the entire direction of the story that was only beginning to unfold. I'd continue the story like this. Some answers arrive because we search for them, but the most unforgettable ones arrive when we least expect them. The glowing screen rested quietly in their hand as every eye in the room turned toward it. No one asked what the message said. Somehow, everyone sensed that this unexpected moment had appeared for a reason. Stay till the end, because what seemed like a simple notification was carrying a meaning far deeper than anyone imagined. The person you love read the first few words once. Then again. A peaceful smile slowly spread across their face. Someone finally whispered, "What happened?" For a brief moment, they couldn't answer. It wasn't because they were shocked. It was because life had chosen the perfect moment to remove the very last doubt still hiding inside their heart. The message was beautifully simple. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with endless words. Yet every sentence seemed to arrive exactly when it was needed. It spoke of kindness, of gratitude, of remembering shared moments that had never truly faded, of hoping life had been gentle. The person you love quietly smiled and said, "It's amazing." "What is?" another voice asked. "I was just gathering the courage to reach out, and before I could, life placed this in my hands." The room filled with a gentle warmth. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the heart begins moving toward someone at the exact moment they begin moving toward you? Not because of chance, but because honesty has a way of finding its own path. The person you love looked down at the message once more. Every word reminded them of something they had almost forgotten, the comfort they always felt whenever thoughts of you appeared. They realized they had spent so much time waiting for the perfect opportunity that they had overlooked the beauty of the present one. "There doesn't have to be a perfect moment," they whispered. "There only has to be a truthful one." Those words settled softly into every heart listening. Someone smiled. Someone quietly nodded. Because they understood that waiting forever often begins with believing tomorrow will always be easier than today. But today had become different. Today was no longer asking for hesitation. It was inviting sincerity. The person you love slowly began typing. Not a long message. Not carefully rehearsed lines. Just honest words flowing naturally from a heart that had finally stopped hiding. "I've been meaning to tell you something for a long time." They paused. Read the sentence again. Then continued. "I don't know where this journey will lead, but I do know one thing. Every time life has tried to pull my attention somewhere else, my heart has quietly found its way back to you." A peaceful silence followed. No one suggested changing a single word. Nothing needed to be added. Nothing needed to be removed. Because truth rarely asks for decoration. It simply asks to be spoken. Far away, the third party looked toward the evening sky one final time before continuing their own journey. Their heart felt lighter than it had in many months. Instead of wondering what might have been, they found themselves smiling at what had become possible. They understood something precious. Real love is never diminished when it is honest. Even when it leads you in a different direction, it leaves your heart wiser than before. Back inside the quiet room, the person you love looked at the message they had written. Their thumb hovered over the send button. This time, there was no fear. Only hope. Only peace. Only the quiet certainty that hiding had already taken enough time from their life. With one gentle tap, the message was sent. No one spoke. Everyone simply watched as the screen changed. A few seconds passed. Then another. The room remained wrapped in hopeful silence. And just when they thought the night had already given them every surprise it could, your reply appeared almost immediately. The first line was only a few words long. But the moment they read it, their eyes filled with quiet emotion, because those words revealed that your heart had been carrying the very same truth all along.